I was waking up in the morning, but my body didn't move. So so basically, I was lying in bed, eyes kind of squinting a little bit open. I was waking up, but I couldn't move my body for like 30 seconds. And I looked into it, and it's this thing called sleep paralysis. So, yeah, when is when my eyes they try and wake up, they try and open, but then I can't move my body. I'm not seeing reality properly, but I'm kind of seeing a percentage of it. It's kind of vivid. The room is vivid, and this has happened twice to me now. So the one the other week was, the one a couple of days ago was about 30 seconds long. The one before that was 2 minutes. I was there for 2 minutes and I couldn't move my body. And I did some research into it, and apparently it's a common thing. And it's not harmful. It's not anything to be concerned about, because a lot of people seem to experience it. But I also, you can't fight it. It's weird. You can't. You're kind of trying to do something. You can't force yourself to move, and it's such a it's a scary feeling, but it doesn't seem to be dangerous. So I kind of wondered if you knew anything about the kind of eye-brain sort of nervous system relationship and what sort of goes on there.
Well, I've heard of sleep paralysis before, and it's basically where your consciousness is emerging out of a dream state, out of that unconsciousness of sleep, but you're not quite conscious yet. And like you say, you had a bit of vision, but it wasn't fully. You didn't have your full visual field in focus. But your body, the most important point is your body hasn't woken up yet. It's like I'm not an expert on this, but it's like your peripheral nervous system that kind of controls all the motor functions of your body hasn't woken up yet, and is still in that sleep state, that unconscious state. And so for a period of time, your like mind feels awake, but your body is still asleep. And yeah, it is a thing that does happen. I've never experienced it personally, but I also know that because it's like a liminal, your mind's in kind of a liminal space between dream and wakefulness. It's not fully either of the two. That some people can have visions, some people can see shadow figures, some people can like hallucinate some things. And yeah, it's not dangerous, but it's also not pleasant at times. I think some people can find it quite unpleasant and scary. And I'd be interested to see if there are more research is done by you or both of us to find out what causes it and what we can do to help it or prevent it from happening. Or I don't know. It's interesting though that's just suddenly come about and you've had it twice already.
Yeah.
Are you sleeping well, or is your sleep dodgy these days?
Yeah, apparently it's normally caused by like when you're sort of sleeping 4 hours a night and shit. My sleep is good, so I think it's just something that is very randomly triggered, and something that maybe everyone experiences a couple times. So I think it was more of a random event, and these two events are kind of a couple months apart. But yeah, I'll let you know if it goes any deeper or I get it again.
So let me just add, I'm sure this will like be posted in some way on our socials if people are interested. I'm interested to hear if people experience this. Like, tell us in the comments. Like, let's create a discussion because it's interesting.
Yeah, has anyone else experienced it? The other kind of warm-up experience that's weird that I wanted to tell you about is, I guess, a little story. So a couple months ago, when I was walking home, there was this 7-8-year-old, and he ran up to me and he was like, "Do you want to buy a Pokemon card?" And a couple of months ago, I was with a friend, and I said, "No, I'm okay." I walked back home, and after my friend goes, so I'm like, I think about it, I'm like, fuck, I should have bought one, because it's not about whether I want that or not. It's about helping a kid who's doing something that I wish I admire, that I would want to encourage in the kind of community. He's obviously a bit poor and whatever. And so a couple of days ago, the same kid runs up to me again, and he has like a full set of Pokemon cards just on this wall with, I think, his sister or something. And he goes up to me and he says, "Do you want to buy a Pokemon card?" And I mean, I can't. I'm massively in debt, and like at this point, and I don't want a Pokemon card, but I still give him the money for it, and he gets happy. I try and tell him about, try and help him out, and realise he doesn't understand what consumers are, or doesn't understand any of these other kind of business concepts, but I try anyway. And that same day, I walked away, went to the library, and then walked on my way back to home. These people were standing outside a restaurant giving out flyers, and they spoke to me. And I was like, they were trying to give me a discount for a meal, and I gave them sort of my position and spoke to them. And then they gave me a free meal on the house, which is like a good kind of 10-12 quid. And I was like, "You sure?" And then they gave it to me and stuff, and I was like, this is a very weird karma thing. Like, this is the most in the same day. This is one of the biggest examples of karma, and I kind of contributed to something divine, I guess. I think those things are linked. I've helped someone below me who I kind of doing something good, and then this has come back around with someone above me helping me. So yeah, I don't know if you have any thoughts or if you've had any examples of karma.
Well, that's not the way that I thought that story was going to go. That's interesting. I thought you were going to sort of go on to a spiel about how, you know, this kid reminded me of a younger version of you, and how, like, you know, I remember you like selling sweets in school at break time and shit, and like having that kind of young hustler vibe, trying to get, you know, maybe you want to buy a new pair of trainers and you don't have the money because your parents won't give you pocket money, so you find some way to sell shit, and you wanted to encourage that, which you kind of did, I guess. You know, you wanted to make this kid happy and kind of give him some positive reinforcement for his small scale young business ventures. But then for the same days, for somebody to just for a restaurant to give you a free meal, you know, it depends on your perspective, doesn't it? Some people, you know, really fact-based materialist thinkers would go, well, there's no link between those two events. It's just you helped one kid and then you were nice to somebody outside a restaurant, they gave you a meal, which is, you know, a valid way of thinking. But then there's also the way of going, well, you put some positive energy out into the world, and, you know, the world fed back to you. I mean, was the free meal, do you think, as a consequence of how you interacted with that person? Or were they just basically like, oh, you can't afford to come here to eat, here's a free meal? Like, how did that interaction go down?
It wasn't anything crazy by me. I was kind of quite low energy, to be honest. It was like midnight. So that interaction wasn't fully me in full energy. Definitely not. And by the way, the point about, that guy selling Pokemon cards did remind me of a younger version of myself. That's why I felt bad when I didn't give it to him a couple months ago, because I was like, fuck, if I was that age, like that's what I would that's what I encourage as a sort of person. Yeah,
interesting, man. Interesting. I guess it's cool, isn't it, when you just go out in the world and you have these experiences? And I call it, you know, this is going to sound so like woo-woo-y, and that's fine because I do this a lot, I guess, but like I call it the universe giving you a sign. Now, whether that's coincidence, whether that's my intuition telling me I'm on the right path, whether it's the right cocktail of emotions that I'm experiencing that make me feel like I'm doing something good, but there are certain instances, circumstances, and feelings I get that are kind of a supporting feeling that I'm like, okay, I'm on the right path now. And it's not like I get a voice in my head or like God shines a bit of light down on me and tells me what to do. It's just like a sign you're on the right track, and things like that are it. The conversations I have with people, when doors in life just seem to open in weird ways. You know, I find this person wants me to do this thing for them, or like this money-making opportunity opens up, or this team want me to go and train with them, or I have a great conversation with a stranger and I learn something new, or just things like this happen. And I think they only happen if you have a positive, enthusiastic, what's the right word, encouraging mentality towards the world. You know what I mean? You want people to do well, you want things to be good, and then things might open up for you. But, you know, beyond, for the person criticizing that perspective, just think of it in the converse, that if you go out in the world negatively, then the doors are never going to open. You know for a fact they're not going to open. So you may as well be a little bit more a lot more positive and enthusiastic and encouraging, because if the doors are going to open, it's more likely it's going to be, in that state when you're open to it, than if you're just like going around with the very pessimistic, limiting kind of view of things.
There is something in it about how the universe conspires, and I'd have to look into it more to get some good argument for it, but there is something in it.
100%. And it's not like, this is why I kind of, it links to my criticism and thoughts around like the idea of the law of attraction and all these spiritual like theories that now just get monetized and packaged and put out to people in just the wrong manner. It's like, no, the universe doesn't do things for you. That's the wrong way of thinking about it. If you sit around waiting for shit to happen, it's not going to happen. You know what I mean? I sound like every fucking motivational video on YouTube, don't I? But I'll carry on. Like, it's not that simple. What it is there will be opportunities that will present themselves to you, small to large, depending on just where you're at and what you're doing, and you have to take responsibility to take action for them. It's not like where I've got to in my sport happened like out of my control. I still had to go to the training sessions when I was like a sad, lonely teenager. I still had to show up to camps when I felt insufficient and shit at what I do. But over time, I just got there. Same reason with the podcast. If anyone compliments it, this didn't happen like by accident. You know what I mean? We just decided we were going to commit. You've put hundreds, maybe even thousands of hours into the production side of things. It's true, man. And I was like a sad teenager reading psychology and philosophy books. But we still did that shit. Do you know what I mean? So the universe doesn't give you answers, but it gives you opportunities. I guess that's a good way of thinking about it.
The law of attraction is that proper, like, girl psychology influencer on Instagram. That's telling you don't chase it. You need to attract it, girl.
Yeah, man. The thing is, my thoughts around that is, right, the theory there is you think it and it'll happen. That's not how it works. But what I think is that you have to have the belief or the thought pattern to then act for the thing to happen. Like, if you don't believe it's possible, you won't do it anyway. You have to have that initially, but it's not just like, point A is thinking it, point B is getting it. It's like a massive like rises and falls and failures and successes and twists and turns, but you just need to have the right mindset to then just take action consistently. And that's what they mean by it, like it just happening. But it was still down to your action anyway. You just needed to, whatever you needed to do in your mind to make you act positively, consistently, is what will make the thing happen. Not just the thought itself. That's just stupid.
Joel, tell me about nothing is as good or bad as you anticipated, and maybe give some context about your trip to Brazil.
Yeah, so this is the smallest point I've got today about my my debriefs from Brazil, but it might link into the next one, or we'll just leave it as a small point in isolation. But yeah, for people listening, like, they'll know that I'm a wheelchair basketball athlete. That's what I kind of do for my job and stuff. And I just went to a junior world championships playing for the Great Britain under-23 squad. We ended up coming away with the bronze medal, which is good on one hand, but is also depressing on the other, because it's not what we came for, and nobody aims for a bronze medal. But in our 2.5-year junior program, in this cycle, as we call it, we only lost one game ever, and that was against Turkey in the semi-final in Brazil. We lost by 4 points, and then we beat Australia in the bronze medal game. So it's a tough one to take, but it was a sick experience, a sick adventure. Did I enjoy it in the majority of moments while I was out there? No, there's a lot to contend with in competitions like this. There's team dynamics, there's egos, there's friendships, there's be spending so much time with people you don't usually, teammates you just see at training camps, and now like your roommates for 2 weeks, and they're like your family. And it's handling the pressured situations, games where you only play 5 minutes, games when you play 25 minutes, but you make mistakes, and just handling all of that into one. So it's like, it's not enjoyable, it's not pleasurable, but it's a challenge and it's an adventure, and that's why I do the things I do. But so obviously all of my points coming into this Jacob and Joel episode are from a debriefs from my experience in Brazil. And this first one is about, and that's just another reminder of something I guess I knew anyway, and we've talked about before, but is the anticipatory nature of the human mind, and how so much of our emotions and our motivations are just tied to shit that hasn't happened yet, and how when you actually get to that thing, it's never as good or as bad as you think it's going to be. And that's kind of advice that you just see on shitty Instagram like quote pages, or like you read a little motivational article and it tells you that, and you go, yeah, that's probably true, but you're only really things that sink in when you experience them yourself. And like, this tournament was the main extrinsic factor of motivation for all my training this season. It was like, I want to get into the right shape to perform at Worlds. That was kind of my philosophy to all my difficult training sessions across the season, and what each of the competitions I did kind of were working towards. And then 2 weeks happen, you play your games, you eat your cafeteria meals, you sleep, you recover, you go see your physio, you chat with your teammates, you chat with the coaches. It kind of goes in a big blur and a big flash, and then it's done. And then it's a collection of memories. And in the moments in Brazil, I wasn't having a great time, I'll be honest. I struggle in sporting social environments, and I don't enjoy being too far away from people that understand me and people that I really feel like I can open up to. So I felt like I had to, in my brain, the way I frame it is I had to be the basketball Joel for an extended period of time. I had to play that persona. I had to be that persona for a long time. It's draining. My social battery felt drained when I got back. But I now will come back to my small hometown in the south coast of Devon after everything is done, and I don't really know what to do with myself. I told myself that I was going to take multiple weeks off training because I was just sick of seeing basketballs and didn't want to think about that side of my life, and I'm still continuing with that. I'm still taking a month off. But especially with no university, it's like, apart from recording a podcast and sort of staying up to date on reading and keeping thinking and writing and things, I don't really have anything to do. There's nothing, no obligations, and there's this flat feeling. And yes, maybe it would have been different if we'd have won, but I still come away going, God, that was such a big... I felt more emotion about that tournament before it than I did during and than I do after. We live our lives so much focusing on the carrot at the end of the stick that we're chasing, and it never turns out to be what we think it's going to be. You can put that in the context of anyone's life listening. You think that exam result's going to change something about how you feel about yourself or your life. It won't. You think that relationship will significantly improve things. I mean, maybe it will, but it won't be what you think it's going to be. That promotion at your work, that moving to that country, you can shift your life, true, but it never, what I'm trying to get across is that it will never be exactly how you anticipate it in terms of the emotional salience, in terms of the specific details, and it will never be as bad or as good as you feel it will be. So all these anxieties and these excitements are really just, they just kind of possess us and make us think and feel certain ways when they're not really accurate and they don't represent how reality will be. So then, as I put at the end of my point here, the happiness and meaning we get from life are ultimately driven by how you connect with the present moment. And while I was out there, people go, oh, you went to South America, that's so cool, you competed for your country, that's so cool. I'm like, yeah. But my favourite parts of that whole trip were FaceTiming my girlfriend in the evening and just being normal. And I'm like, I can do that shit all the time. So what am I trying to say? I'm trying to say that you can be as happy in the mundane as you can be in the great events of your life. And that doesn't mean we don't work towards them, but it just means we should be aware of how our mind works and aware that things in the future, whether that's in the near future or far future, seem so shiny or seem so deadly, but often they don't reflect our feelings as accurately as we think they do.
Yeah, I just thought of this analogy just as you were speaking about how that outcome of the gold medal is kind of like a lust rather than a love for the game. And I saw something recently what Dante said about lust in his book The Divine Comedy. He kind of refers to lust as this wind, and the wind kind of, it represents the desire, and you're this person and the wind's kind of pushing against you to go in this way and this way and this way. And he uses it in the context of sort of sexual partners, in that if you're thinking about loads of different people, your wind is constantly pushing you either side, and you're kind of a slave to it. And I feel like there could be some kind of link here with if you're that guy playing basketball and you want to be top scorer, you want to have the crowd cheer your name, you want the respected persona, you want to win the gold medal, you want to then go Paralympics in a couple of years. I feel like there are these kind of winds that are pushing against you, and maybe they are kind of all going in the same direction, but then there isn't the love for being there right now, I don't think.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think what you were speaking there, I think is a really great point. I was thinking about how the medal, the desire for the medal is ego, isn't it? It is. I mean, we're not shitting on the ego there. We all need one, but we know when they get overactive and they take too much control over us, they're a negative force. And why do we want medals? We want medals so we can hang them around our neck and for everyone to clap for us. Also, like, we can show somebody, oh, here's this medal I won back in 2025, or you know, look how good we were. We won this tournament. We beat all these people. We're better than them. You know, it is so ego filled, and there's nothing wrong with it. It's tradition. It's how it should work. If you're the best athlete, you should win the gold medal. That's how it works. But the medal doesn't mean anything to me. I think, you know, I've given my bronze medal to my grandparents because I'm shit at looking after medals. I just keep them in boxes somewhere in my room and never look at them. Whereas my grandma, she'll treasure that shit. Do you know what I mean? She'll show her friends and she'll take it to church or whatever and be super proud. I think even if it was a gold medal, I would have given it to them because that's not what it means to me. And it's not the best thing about being an athlete. It's not even in the consideration for me of best things. And I think your analogy is really nice. You lust for the medal. But what you should love is the way that, and I guess maybe this is just me, but I guess I wonder if some other athletes would relate to this, but the love is the way that pressured situations and competition evoke character development in you. Like that, I can't reenact that in my daily life. I can't reenact playing in front of a crowd, playing in front of, you know, thousands of people watching a live stream and hearing the British national anthem. And closing my eyes and feeling the goosebumps wash all around my body, knowing that we don't know the outcome of this game and there's some sort of stakes on it, and seeing what comes out of me and seeing what comes out of my teammates and how we work as individuals, but also as a unit. And that opportunity of growth and an opportunity to be enlarged by life and to take something on, take on an adventure, you know, be a hero from Joseph Campbell's perspective, that's what I love. And that's not about medals, that's not about accolades, that's about me, that's about spiritual and psychological growth and about the chance to have an adventure. Does that make sense?
Yeah. When you're talking about the medals, it reminds me of Ricky Gervais's Golden Globes. There's a bit where he says, I've got 3 Golden Globes. One's a doorknob. No, one's a doorstop. One I hit burglars with, and then one I shove at night. And it also reminds me of Jim Carrey when he's just like, he's in this like awards show in Hollywood and they're congratulating him and he's like, all of this is meaningless. And that's the same mindset that you have, I think.
It's kind of true though, man. Like, we were sat there in this opening ceremony and I have to caveat it with a closing ceremony, and I have to caveat it with, if we'd have won the tournament, maybe I would have felt differently. But we were sat there collecting our bronze medals, and I was just like, I don't care. Can I just go and sleep now? I was so tired, like tired physically, tired mentally. I didn't have a great game against the Aussies in the bronze medal game, and I was just, I'm done with this now. This isn't what it's about to me. Once the final buzzer goes and the dance is over, I don't care about the material things we're being given. It's a nice thing for other people. You know what I mean? When I show other people my medal, they're like, oh, that's cool. Or like for my kids in the future, be like, what did Dad do when he was younger? Well, he was an athlete and he won these things. Like, that's cool to show your kids. But no, it's not, the love isn't in that for me.
I'm going to hit you with another question. I think it's good to keep the topic. Tell me about the opportunity for character development.
Yeah, so I kind of just touched on it there in my little ramble, and you saw how like enthusiastic I got about it. But this is kind of on that point of what was this tournament about to me. And I've written here, it was an opportunity for character development. It was a chance to be enlarged by life and to do something courageous, right? In brief moments of meditation that I had during the national anthems, because before every game, they played the British national anthem and then the national anthem of the other team, and we all clapped for each other and stuff. I never sung. One, because I'm not really very patriotic and don't really give a shit about God saving the King. 2, I don't really care. I don't really know the lyrics, so I would just be singing and mumbling and wouldn't know what I was doing. So instead, I just decided each time I was going to close my eyes and take that 20 seconds to remind myself of some key philosophies. And I think I talk about that in my third point, which we'll go on to later. But I remember just, deeply breathing, reminding myself of what matters in life and feeling this wave of goosebumps over my body. And it was a real feeling like I was truly alive and I was doing something really meaningful. And there was pressure. And it could have gone wrong, and I was stepping into the unknown, and I was doing something courageous. And I realized in that time that the choice to be enlarged by life, the choice to step into growth and not let fear and a lack of agency sort of violate the meaning you could experience from that situation, that choice to open yourself up to life and potentially get hurt, potentially fail, potentially be ridiculed, the choice to do that is what we ultimately want. We want to feel alive. We want to feel tested. We want to feel like we are becoming something. We don't want to stagnate. We want to become. And that's the beautiful thing that I'm taking away from Brazil. And actually, it will maybe give me an advantage in the future as my athletic career continues, because that's my philosophy. Is I want to be opened up by life. I want pressured situations in life to really put me under stress, I guess, in the most positive term, and see, who does Joel Clifton become? What side of myself will manifest when I'm put in that situation? And so that's what I'm really grateful for, ultimately, from what I get to do.
I was watching the match, and I was watching the opening ceremonies, or the bit where I was watching where everyone sings "God Save the Queen," and I saw you just like closed eyes, just meditating. And I was like, "That's the most Joel thing ever." And I used it as B-roll for one of the stories, and then the people DM me of like, why is Joel not singing? That's the real question.
Really? What, people from the basketball community, or just random like viewers on the podcast?
Just random people, yeah, on the podcast, yeah. But I guess,
how did you reply to them? What did you say?
I said something about the piece kind of allowing you to play the game in a better frequency. Because I think that's you're not an athlete that hypes himself up like to get all so ready to dominate the other team. You kind of want to. You talk about maybe like a more peaceful approach, and I think that's what helped you. Is you did well under pressure. And
this is very true, and it was very useful for me. And one thing I will have to say is I'm very grateful for my teammates for being very accepting of that. You know, as much as I know that I'm not one of the boys in the group, and I'm not part of the like clickiness and stuff, or the clique, you know what I mean? And that's fine. You know what I mean? Like, we all get on in terms of like teammate relationships. It's great. They might not be my best mates, but we work as a unit. And one thing for that was this tournament, I really felt like they accepted that my way of prep before a game is different. And like, we had one players meeting right at the end of the tournament, as we were getting towards the sort of business end of things. And I remember one guy saying, like, he was putting a bit of feedback out to the group and saying that the changing room today felt a bit dead and a bit like quiet. And he was like, we all perform best when we're like all singing and loud. And then he said, apart from Joel, who goes into his own world. But it wasn't like a taking a piss. It was like an acknowledgement. And I just sort of gave him a nod. And that was like, from a character like that, to acknowledge that I have a different way of doing things and not take the piss and just sort of say it as it was. I really appreciated that.
No, that's really positive. And going into your own world, that's a good way to put it. I think it's just a difference in character. I guess the other boys wouldn't necessarily do better, like meditating before the game.
No, they want to be up for it. They want to be adrenalized. They want to be barking and sort of like going crazy, and that's great. Like, that works for you. That's good.
I'm gonna pivot onto
go to one of your points.
This is inspired by James Hollis's book, and it's about the shadow, and it goes into more depth way more depth than I knew about the shadow. So, from my understanding, the shadow is this thing that represents what we do not want to be, and it's kind of like the animalistic part of the self. It's kind of like how. By the way, I looked into the Sphinx, so it's kind of like the Sphinx. The Sphinx is a body of a lion and a head of a human, and I think that's what that's one interpretation. I think is that the body is this animalistic part of ourselves, whereas the head is this kind of higher, sort of got this crown and whatever. And so I think the shadow is it links a lot to the animalistic parts. And the interesting thing about the shadow is it's unconscious, or it only, which means that it only makes itself known when you confront it. And I guess what we need to do with it is we need to confront it. And an example of this would have been, there was a couple weeks ago, a friend of a friend asked me what her first impressions of her was, and apparently, I kind of respected this because apparently she asks everyone she meets what her first impressions of her are. And you ask that to a guy like me, and I give her the truth. I say that these are the positive things, but you're a bit impulsive, and there's a couple things where you react to things wrong. But that's a clear example of I made her shadow conscious by telling her what I did and didn't like. Well, what I didn't like is the shadow part, but confronting the shadow means that you're understanding your desires, you're understanding what your ego is, you're understanding where your morals are, and you need someone else to tell you that sometimes. So, for me, there's a big part of there's my part of myself, my ego. It wants me to maybe be an important, a respected person, and I need to. I can't kind of realize that and not do anything with it. I need to. Hollis says that Jung says that you need to integrate it, and you do that by kind of channeling it into something. So my ego maybe is channeled. My thing of wanting to be an important person might be channeled into maybe clipping myself up on the podcast, saying something that I think is interesting. And I think that's a healthy way to integrate it. And I have, lustful desires maybe sometimes, and my way of integrating that is to make the effort to approach women. And personally, I think the best way to integrate it then is to take action. And there's a very interesting thing about that. So first you recognize it, maybe by someone else telling you something, and then you take action on that to integrate it. Now, the action point's very interesting because I linked this with forgiveness. So action is more powerful than thoughts because once you act, you can't take it back. It's made itself alive in reality. It's like bought some real estate into space and time. It exists once it's acted. If you're just thinking something, it's not necessarily, it can sort of come and go. But if you act, it has its own. That action has its own place in space and time.
I like that.
And that makes me think about forgiveness because we have our shadow. We kind of need to forgive it because if you say from a person to person example, if someone hurts you with their shadow and you don't forgive them, that means that when they acted, their action still haunts you. It's still doing damage rent-free in your head. But when you forgive it, that action no longer has power. It no longer has power rent-free in your head. Because to forgive is to kind of overcome what they've done. If I say, if someone insults me and I say it's fine, you were drunk, you weren't thinking right, it ends there. I'm no longer thinking fuck that person thinks something about me, and every time I see him I'm now gonna have to carry on and not be friends with him. And if I kind of go into self forgiveness, which I think is a part of the shadow, I'll tell you a little story. I think one of the biggest mistakes I've ever made was when I was in year 9, and I betrayed one of my closest friends by not sticking up for him when he kind of needed me. And he was basically, there was a lot of bad rumours going around him with his breakup with his girlfriend, and it was like things of like he hit her, he was horrible to her, stuff like that. And I took her side basically straight away without hearing him out. And then I was quite unloyal, and then I actually ended up later down the line sort of totally not being friends with him, and then going out with that girl, which is it's very bad. But so that's kind of a big regret of mine. Even if that person did do something, you got to at least hear them out. And even if they did do something bad, you still stick by them.
You guide them to look at what they did wrong and see how they can improve on it, and sort of and help them repent for their wrongdoings, I guess, if they're a true friend.
If I was to kind of hold that regret still right now, then it's kind of like the regret is like the shadow hasn't been overcome, and which like I kind of had to forgive myself through that and make sure that I'm like absolutely loyal from now on. But this is also why they say, like, if you're going to go out and fix the world, fix yourself first. And yeah, actually, I'll pause there to see if you got any thoughts, and then I'll carry on.
Yeah, the shadow is such an interesting thing. It's why it's such a like revolutionary theory and set of ideas. But I think it's an idea that runs a lot through that book, through a lot of like depth psychology and psychoanalysis. Is that the problem is not necessarily the features of your psyche, because they're baked into experience, they're given to you because you're a human. Every human has a shadow. Every human has a part of themselves they don't want to look at, that they wish they didn't have, that contains their darkness. But the problem is not these psychic entities' existence. The problem is when there's conflict in your psyche that's unaddressed. So what that means is when the shadow is acting in your life through your unconscious, directing and influencing your feelings, your behaviors, the way you interact with reality and other people, when it's influencing you, but you don't know about it, or you're resisting it and you're repressing it. Everything in you, every drive in you, every part of your psyche wishes to be acknowledged in some way, even the darkest part of yourself. And what do we do about that? And that's why, Jung poses a great solution, which is integrate it, recognize it, say to your shadow through your feelings, your thoughts, your actions, say to it, I recognize you're there, I know you exist, but I'm not going to let that tear up my life. I'm going to channel your energy into doing something productive for me and my loved ones in the wider world. And I'm going to forgive you for being there, and I'm going to learn from you. And actually, once the shadow gets heard, I think that's the start of it being managed, I guess. And I think forgiveness is a big part of that. Do we have a choice between hating that part of ourselves or forgiving it, integrating it, and managing it? And I think I really like that. That's where you've got to through your own thoughts.
Yeah. Hollis says that we may think we can run from the shadow, but it travels where we travel. And travel's kind of the right word, because you can think of this in a wider context of, I don't know, the city of London, in that it's got all these opportunities, but it's also got deep corruption. And then you contrast that with another place in Devon, and that has its problems as well. It has its shadow. So, and you then use travel in the kind of individualistic context of, you can self-improve, but we still have desires, and our own shadows just going to change. It will still kind of be there. And there's also a good argument that when Jung says the shadow is unconscious, that suggests that, well, it's always going to be there to some degree because it's unconscious. So we just might not know about it. And that's what makes it powerful, because you don't know how bad you could be. You don't
know what it is until it's influencing your sense of and behavior in reality. And yeah, you're so right. You never let go of sort of psychic forces that can tear your life apart. Like, you might become the most balanced, most successful, most empathetic, joyful human being you want. But there's still going to be a drive then to slack off the things that got you there, to lose that humility and think you've completed it, and start losing that stability is destabilizing in anything we do. So it's not just like you integrate your shadow once and it's never there again. It's always there. It's always going to, but we love that. I think we should love that because it poses challenge and it poses a constant opportunity for self-development.
Yeah, when you said there about how it distorts your reality a little bit, or it could do, then I think Hollis used the words projecting, in that you're talking to someone one-to-one, but you're projecting it and you don't realize that, and it's changing the way that you interact with the world, but you don't know it. And though, to kind of conclude, it's Jung said, our task in life is wholeness, not goodness. So I've been trying to figure out what that means. I think generally we shouldn't aim for goodness because it's maybe unrealistic, and that we all kind of are selfish in our own way, really. And there's going to be times where goodness isn't strong enough, and everyone's kind of nice until they're not. So I think this is a bit abstract, this conclusion of wholeness, but I think if we can continually kind of recognize and integrate our shadow, then I think that's kind of what he means.
I think goodness implies perfection. And there is no one human being in the world that is perfect. We are cursed by our ego, by our self-consciousness, by our social and political structures, by our connection with other people, by our intellect, like by our biological drives for like power and sex and violence and aggression. Like we are such a complicated creature that no one of us is 100% good. And I think what he's saying there is we shouldn't aim for this ideal of being good and perfect, because we're not. We do have darkness in us. We do have the capacity for aggression. We have the capacity to ruin other people's lives, and yet we don't. And that involves an integration of the good and the ugly to be the whole, be the whole person, a fully formed, integrated individual. And that was his theory of, individuation. That's what it meant to become a person, was to look at each individual part of yourself, your psyche, even the disgusting parts of yourself, the dark parts of yourself, the violent parts of yourself, the jealous parts of yourself, the toxic parts of yourself, and understand that they are all you, and do a productive thing with all of that and become stronger as a consequence of that self-examination.
Well said. I'm going to link this to a different context, and I bring this up because what I guess my point is here is that we need to focus on the whole self, not just someone's shadow. Not just neglect the other parts of the self. So, me, my mum, and my sister were having a debate the other week.
This is how all good stories start.
We were having a debate. It started with Andrew Tate. My mum brought it up, and she was kind of interrogating me a little bit about it. And this was my argument. So I said, okay, let's assume that Andrew Tate is a net negative for society. Does that mean that it's immoral to consume anything that he says? And then they said, yes, that's immoral. And I said, well, okay, that's fine. So then where's the line? Is it immoral to not read Harry Potter because J.K. Rowling is transphobic? Which I don't know if she is or not. I haven't really looked into it. But they said, my sister didn't really know what to say, but they kind of came to the conclusion. She said that she's basically used to separate the art from the artist argument, but not in those words. And so then I said, well, okay, so let's say that okay, we can consume Harry Potter, but we can't consume Andrew Tate. Then okay, if we're going to use and separate the art from the artist argument, then what about Kanye West? And then my sister was like, well, no, that's a bit too far. I don't listen to him anymore. And then I was like, get up your playlist. And then I found, okay, he's produced that song. He's featured on that song. Completely. And then it got really picky, the kind of debate, and it is stopped kind of functioning as like a thoughtful discussion. But okay, so I bring this up because whoever you want to put in this category, J.K. Rowling, Tate, Kanye, I think that they have a massive, massive shadow, or they might have a massive, massive shadow, but there's still the other whole part of that self that maybe has something useful to put into society. And then I think about that with other people, in that we should forgive in a way, or at least we should kind of see people in the whole context, in the whole kind of that they're a human being, they make mistakes, and there's been something in their past that's maybe influenced them to make a very irrational kind of decision. However, I will present an argument against this. So, the argument against this is quite strong, because you can say it gets very tricky when you bring up kids, because an adult can understand what Kanye West is doing and saying isn't right about Hitler, but children are very impressionable, and so I won't go too much into this, but then there is an argument that says no, you shouldn't consume him whatsoever. He should be cancelled because kids are impressionable. So yeah.
Yeah, I think I'm on similar lines to what you said there. I think it's great that you can have these conversations at your home with your family. Like, it's important stuff, man. I think, yeah, the problem comes when the majority, or let's say just a lot or a handful of people, especially, like you said, children, don't have the ability and don't have the critical thinking skills to separate something that somebody says that they like and something that somebody says that's immoral and out of the question. And especially just when I guess if somebody has a child has a role model, once they've identified with that social figure as a role model to them, as someone desirable, then anything they say could just be seen as right because it's associated with the role model. And the child doesn't have the ability to like consider points more clearly because they just haven't got the sort of intellectual capacity yet because they're a kid. I think that's the problem with obviously like the characters that you mentioned, and we don't really know what to do about that, because is it the responsibility of the creator, let's say, to control how the consumer interprets their work? Yes and no. Some ways no, some ways yes. It's one of those weird mixed, like not black white but shades of grey debate. But we also have to like think about what's the best for our collective consciousness as a society and as humanity. Like what are the right things we should be focusing on and thinking about. And I think you can get, let's say, the positive philosophies that Tate may have about like getting in good shape and working hard and having the positive parts of masculinity, like the capacity to protect and provide. You can get that from your dad if he was a positive role model, or other figures. We don't have to go to a guy who has that darkness. Same way with Kanye, like you can listen to great musicians without one that has anti-Semitic views. It's just like it's a weird debate, and I think each individual will land somewhere along the same line. But yeah, we all think the same thing. It's just difficult, like you say, to pin down where is that line. But I think the idea of seeing a whole person is crucial. It takes empathy. I mean, maybe that's empathy in its purest form. It's seeing somebody for who they are, and not just who they present themselves as, who they are on the inside. What are the underlying motivations behind what they do? What might their shadow be projecting into the world? You know, if somebody does wrong against you, if somebody betrays you or does you wrong, well, maybe that's just a manifestation of their own insecurity and struggle. And we know that on a sort of intellectual basis. We can hear that and go, yeah, that probably makes sense. But how can we translate that to then change our feelings and how we respond to that person? And that takes mindfulness and a sort of a good relationship with our own self. You know what I mean? Our self-esteem needs to be quite stable to then not be rocked by that. But yeah, 100%. And like in the same way, I think that will just make your interaction with people much more friendly because you see them, they're you in another form. They're another human struggling to feel happy, struggling to have a stable sense of well-being. So yeah, they might do you wrong. Yeah, they might make mistakes, but they're imperfect. They're just as imperfect as you are. You know, they have just the same emotional hardware as you do. And so people might make mistakes in what they say, what they do. And people should repent for their misjudgments in action and improve and have that intention. But we shouldn't shun people for being who they are and seeing that we all have darkness in us. So, yeah, very nice.
Yeah, well said. Tell me about using the right hemisphere world.
Yeah, so this is my final reflection point from Junior Worlds. And it's a subject that I think I'm going to expand as time goes by. Because as you see here, my notes are quite fragmented. But I tried to, at the competition, what I call apply the right hemisphere world to a situation that requires high performance and that contains pressure. Now, what do I mean by the right hemisphere world? Right now, I'm really struggling to define that term concretely, and I can only really describe to you the things that I do and experience that align with that concept in my brain. And this comes from Ian McGilchrist's work on the two worlds of the left and right hemisphere. And the right hemisphere is the part of your brain that regulates your ability to see the world in its full context and experience the world in its full context. The right hemisphere is the one more associated with art and with metaphor and with poetry, and with the discovery of new skills, the development of new skills. As you develop a skill or get more used to an environment, it is that those functions are more, how do I put it? They're more associated with the right hemisphere, and as they become more sort of fine-tuned and trained, they become more left hemisphere. It's very interesting. But essentially, the right hemisphere deals with the new, it deals with the unknown, and it deals with reality in its full context. That's me kind of really summarizing that fantastic piece of work and body of research. But how did I then use the right hemisphere world in Brazil? Well, to me, this was applying a playful, poetic stance on the world, trying to not take anything too seriously, take results on games too seriously, take missed shots too seriously. Kind of walking that line of not giving too much of a shit, but giving the right amount of shits. Looking after myself, but not getting stressed if I lose half an hour of sleep, or not getting stressed if I didn't eat too much at lunch, etc. Along those same lines is seeing the things around me as a game or as a dance, right? Without ego and with the willingness to be seen as a fool. We've talked about the fool archetype a lot on the podcast, but understanding that basketball is a game. It's not real life. It's not life or death. It's not a war. It's not even that deep. Do you know what I mean? We're just trying to throw a ball in the hole more than another team. And it has a sense of seriousness because it's an international stage and we've put a lot of time and thousands of hours of training into this, but essentially it's the same game we picked up when we were 8 years old, just being like weird, confused, insecure, disabled kids. So seeing it through that angle, I guess seeing it in its full context, maybe seeing it in the way that I saw it as a kid, as a new thing, as an unknown, as an exciting thing, without tying my ego to it. As you know, how do I want to be seen by the world? How do I want to perform? How many points do I want to score? What medals do I want to win? It's also reminding myself of some grassroots philosophies that keeps me grounded, linking back to something we spoke about earlier today, my meditation during the national anthem. In those 20 seconds, I reminded myself of the same thing. I said to myself, remember the mystery inherent in being. The fact that I don't know how the fuck I even exist. I don't know how I've been thrust into this world and given this opportunity to live here and do this stuff and know these people. And the fact that I am ultimately not that illusory self that I've created to myself, for myself to exist as in the world. I'm not Joel Clifton. I'm not this basketball persona. I'm the spirit and the awareness that possesses it all. And I'm also the sum of all my most vulnerable parts, right? I'm not just the 20-year-old athlete I am today. I'm the kid who first discovered this sport. I'm the kid that didn't think he was good enough. I was the kid that nobody rated. And that doing the tournament for those versions of me and all those versions of me collected into one, and seeing myself then maybe in this whole context, like the right hemisphere views reality, is a much more way to fuel my performance than my ego's desire for people to take notice of me and to admire me. And also, finally, it was in the music that I listened to. I was very, very deliberate about the few songs that I listened to before every fixture. I created a playlist specifically for that. And this was music that to me had transcendental dimensions. This could be grand melodic strings. I listened to a lot of cello and classical music, or emotive piano, or lyrics that use great grand metaphors. That to me, these songs, these pieces of art, these compositions communicate something about what life is really about, that kind of pushes past the rational part of the mind, the left hemisphere, and it communicates something to me about what's going on in this reality in a beautiful way. You know, we talked about it on the episode the other day with the two musicians, Sigs and Farsi, about how some songs represent what life's about, and to me, that's classical and emotive kind of love songs, but not love in the kind of very light, surfacey sense, but love in the deep sense. And so this right hemisphere world to me is a way of being. It's a frame with which to view and contend with the world, and it's alternative and it's different. And I guess I would only have come to this through my psychological investigation and through doing a podcast. But as an athlete, how can I incorporate this and improve my performance? I think it worked for me because I didn't get too caught up in the minutiae of things. I didn't get too caught up in the pressure. And yes, I didn't have the perfect game. There were games where I didn't perform as well as I could. But overall, it put me in a good place to play. And it's something I'm going to expand on in the future. So, yeah, what do you think?
Yeah, it sounds like this right hemisphere world is the approach of feeling of rather than
thinking. Yeah.
Yes. And I think the full seeing it in the full context is it's only a game in the grand scheme of your career, or or a temporary moment in your life. That could be one interpretation. I don't suppose you listened to Alex O'Connor on Waffling recently.
No, I saw he went on, and I saw that that's a mad crossover because Joe Weller is like the YouTuber that 10-year-old Joel fucking loved. And I'm like, damn, this Alex O'Connor talks about shit that 20-year-old Joel is interested in. So it's kind of like a weird fusion. But yeah, tell me more.
He brought up the right hemisphere, and this is really going to test my memory. They were talking about a study where someone had damage. I think it was to the left hemisphere, and he was sitting down on a chair, and he got asked, why did you stand up or move across the room? I feel like the participant answered, and he was like, I didn't know I did that. But then when he was asked, why did you do it? He was able to tell him, well, I needed a glass of water, or I needed to go to the toilet. Some kind of study like that.
I can help. Yeah, I think you're pointing to something here, which is that the left hemisphere is more associated with what and how, very functional, very grasping the world and manipulating it to our own intention. Whereas the right hemisphere is about meaning. What's the meaning behind why we did the thing? So in that study, obviously I didn't listen to the podcast, I don't know what you're referencing, but it sounds to me like the guy didn't know what he did. He didn't know how he did it, but he knew why. He knew the meaning behind the action, and that is the right hemisphere. That is the world that it lives in. So maybe, yes, my perspective is less about what I do and how I do it, but more about the meaning that I'm applying to that situation. It's not the canvas, it's the painting I'm creating on it.
Yeah, I would recommend that episode actually. I think you'd like it. And you also at the end of that point you pointed to music, and I after the episode I listened to what was it, Birds Rising, that track that you said
Arrival
was
of the Birds, so good.
yeah, and for me that track kind of paints a whole world when you listen to the rise of the crescendo.
Mm.
It really is like it's a whole world in that track, and that's very right hemisphere. Maybe compared to a song that function is to give you as much dopamine with the big crashing sort of drums and things like that.
Yeah, because that song's not happy, is it? But it's not sad. It's somewhere in the middle. It's deep. It's deep like life. It's as Farsi said. It's the balance between melancholy and hope. It's this almost all-encompassing feeling of joy and sadness at the same time. And I'm going to say something that I was thinking about. I've had this one line stuck in my head for like a few weeks now, and I've not said anything about it. But there's a line in the song Hallelujah, which has been done like loads of times. But in the version that I've been listening to recently, there's a line where he says, "Life is not a victory march. It's a cold and it's a broken hallelujah." And I was like, that sums it up, right? That is what that song is, and what a lot of classical music emits is this vibe that life is a cold and it's a broken hallelujah. Life is not perfect. Life is stricken with limitation and suffering, and yet we have to be grateful for it because there are joys in it. You still say hallelujah for the fact you're alive and the fact you get to live here, but it's not perfect. It's cold and it's broken. And I just really, that's to me what that song communicates, because there is this rise of beauty and awe and the sublime, but yet there is a sort of, there's a hum of melancholy in it as well.
I think the article that you sent me, a fantastic article, is titled "The Eurotic." I think this is very right hemisphere, and I had some thoughts about it. The Eurotic is, I think, did I write the author down? I kind of want to credit her.
Well, you know what we should do? Leave the article, the Substack link in the show notes on like Spotify or whatever, so people, if they want to, can read the article, because it's not about, when people hear the word erotic, they immediately think of like sexual stuff, which is a factor in the article, but the article itself is more. It's more about a life philosophy and where the root of that word and the Greek god eros and all that. But I won't steal your thunder. I'll let you go on about it.
Yeah. So the author, she defines the erotic as when you want something or someone, but you're not able to explain why. Just choose to move towards it. So it's as I kind of said about how the right hemisphere is about feeling. It's very similar to that. And I used this in two contexts, one in relationships and one in kind of life. So in relationships, what is the opposite of erotic? Well, it's this thing that a lot of people are aware of, known as transaction theory. Now, transaction theory, I kind of think of it about the common example when someone says to me, "What are you looking for in a woman?" and I give 10 boxes that need to be ticked off. It's a theory about logic, and it kills the adventure of the kind of romance, and it's kind of, I think it comes from a little bit this kind of the way that love is commercialized, because love may be like in marketing and film and things, it has this, the boy has to be rich, 6 foot. The girls have this thing nowadays. It's called
What was
the
that
free.
like fucking Instagram reel that went viral of the girl saying like 6'5", blue eyes, like trust fund? It was that kind of bullshit. Yeah, yeah, 100%.
There's a thing that I've seen. Girls want a boy with the 3 6s, the 6 foot, the 6 figures, and the 6 inch.
Yeah,
um,
yeah,
it's only I think it's only 15% of men are 6 foot, so it's very unrealistic and it's an illusion. And it's an illusion because those kind of boxes they offer a potential. When it's in kind of a commercialized context, they're selling a potential of what this love transaction can give you in the future. Which is also, as a little side point, which is why approaching people is going to be better than dating apps, because dating apps is judged on the transaction, whereas approaching people is judged on the behavior that you give them in that.
you'd almost say the dating app, you're doing it with your left hemisphere. You're picking apart that person and seeing them as a form of as a series of parts. Like, where do they work? How tall are they? What color are their eyes? What color is their hair? And that's not a human being. It's like if you tried to make a human being with all those parts, you wouldn't be able to do it. It would end up looking like a fucking life-size Mr. Potato Head, right? Whereas what you want is a person. You want the whole person. Like we were saying, people are imperfect wholes. And so that's how, yeah, that you're so right. Meeting somebody in real life, you get their essence. You get something that you can't write down, that you can't, the left hemisphere can't draw out and extract. It's the right hemisphere world.
I'm good. This next part is really good. If I'm going to do a little test on you, so if I want to tell you how imagination works. So when I ask you, imagine a pear. Okay, if you do that right now. Now, if I ask you, when you imagine that pear, did it have a hole in it? Did it have a sort of a bit of rotten marks? No.
No.
So what does that mean? That means when you imagined it, it was perfect. That's how imagination works. It's always going to present the most perfect version. And so this links to when you see someone on a dating app or you see some kind of commercialized aspect of love, is you really, when you imagine something, you see the most perfect version of it, and then you meet them and then you're disappointed. And so when you're in love, you're not in love with them, you're in love with the idea
Yep.
of kind of, texting someone back and forth.
And that's why, let me just jump in a sec. That's why we have the idea of the honeymoon period, which is like you don't really know if your relationship is good and stable until you've been with somebody for 6 months, because you can still live in the illusion that they are the ideal you thought they were for that amount of time. And over time, that either comes crashing down and you don't like what you see and you part ways, or the ideal comes crashing down and who they are really emerges and you like that. And people think we love people for their perfection, or their sort of the benefits that they provide you, or the things that they have, or the characteristics they possess that you don't, or whatever. But I don't think that's true. You love the whole person. You love their uniqueness. You even love the maybe undesirable characteristics about somebody if you really love them.
Yeah, you gotta love their imperfections, don't you?
And that then is an irrational kind of love. It's not the kind of love that the left hemisphere would understand. It's the kind of love that's erotic because you don't understand why. You just have a yearning for that person or that thing.
Yeah, you gotta love their shadow as well. But that's not what you see. And to use this, I really like this point of imagination. It makes so much sense, because I can use it in other contexts. There's a lot of guys that have a business idea and get extremely hyped in the first couple of weeks of, I'm going to make loads and loads of money very, very quickly. And the thing about that's all in their imagination. But the thing with imagination is, as soon as you try and bring that idea into reality, it loses its perfection. Yeah, it loses it the minute you bring it into reality. And this is why you kind of have to have no expectation. And yeah, I think the opposite. So the opposite is in relationships is the erotic. So that instead of ticking boxes, that means I like this person because they have a bit of an edge to them. They have a spark. They have an aura, um, and then it kind of links to Alan Watts' thing of why do we say falling in love rather than rising into love? And that's because fall is a risk. Fall connotes faith. You follow your faith. You take a risk, and this is very very nicely portrayed in the Kiss painting by what's he called? Something Klimt. Are you familiar with the Kiss painting?
I'm gonna look it up now. By Klimt.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yes. In that painting, it's like it's one of the best paintings I've seen on love. In that painting, there's a kind of a hill. They're kissing on a hill, and that what the girl is quite near the edge of the hill.
Yeah.
It kind of connotes that risk, and I really like it as well because all of the colors and the kind of the male is this like he's got loads of shapes inside him. She's got loads of shapes, and it shows their emotion. But I think the hill is a very good detail because it shows how much of a risk that relationship is, and why. And then you might say, well, why is it a risk? And it's because you're sacrificing other options, other partners, and she might. How do you know she's going to be loyal, and truthful and things like that? So it really relationships are a risk, and Nisha refers to it as a plank. Relationships as a plank. That's what it is. You're walking on this plank that's tilting.
Yeah. I mean, I literally, mate, the other day talking to my mum, and like, the relationship that I'm in at the moment is very new still in terms of like how people perceive things. But it's not only that, it's a very new sort of concept to me. It's my first sort of proper, I guess, like long-term relationship outside of like school and college and stuff. And so I was saying to mum, like, it's scary because I can feel myself getting emotionally attached to somebody, right? Like in Brazil, I went away, and for the first time in a long time, maybe even ever, I had someone I properly missed and wanted to go home to see. And it's like, that's terrifying because now I know if anything happened that was negative and this relationship imploded and ended, I'm going to be in pain. And that is that risk. It's that falling. It's that falling, and you might fall flat on your face, or you might fall into kingdom of heaven and meet the person you're going to spend the rest of your life with. But if you're not willing to fall and get your face smacked and smashed up, then you're not going to get there in the first place. But it's scary. It's 100%. And if I saw it as like the person had to tick these boxes for me to commit to them, then I'm just going to end up being alone. Because people aren't just boxes that get ticked. They're people. They're whole organisms. They're souls. They're emotional beings. They're alive. They're a thing that changes, and adapts and evolves. But there's something beautiful in that, and that's how I like that painting as well. That they're not. You can tell it's a person, but they're this kind of collection of colors and shapes. It's almost like you see their essence rather than just their physical body in it.
I used to kind of make that mistake of people need to take boxes. I think
So did I.
because I worded that as you have standards, and it means that I don't know then about standards. I've always kind of gone about life as saying like I have to have very high standards if I was to go out with someone. It kind of takes that away. So it made me rethink that. And if I kind of use the erotic now and in a kind of life context, um, we are told as we grow up to have our lives planned out, to manage our time, to live in this kind of framework. And in this desire, the author puts it nicely, and that desire is a liability. So what what your life is composed to make safe decisions. If and the author then says, well, these decisions don't stir the soul. And so what's the erotic? How can we apply that to our lives? Well, the author uses these examples of why does a woman leave her secure job to pursue a career as a sculptor? Because it makes her pulse quicken.
Mm.
Why does a man move across the world to a country with? Why does the man move across the world to live in a country that he doesn't speak the language? It doesn't make sense. Well, the world.
I'm so glad you love this article, by the way, because it struck me, and I thought I need to send this to Jacob.
Yeah, I think the erotic is making decisions that align with how alive it makes us feel.
Yes.
That means making a decision that makes you feel alive, not because it changes your paycheck, not because it offends your ego or your upbringing or what your parents think, because it makes you feel alive. And I think there's a bit of literature called The Dice Man that I want to include in this. So there's a book called The Dice Man, and it's about this guy who's about 30 and he's very bored. He lives sort of the basic life of his wife and his kids. And then one day he decides that he has a dice, and each number on the dice is going to represent the decision that he makes. And the book is done to make it very kind of dramatic. So if he rolls a 3, he might cheat on his wife. If he rolls a 2, he might kill someone or stuff like that. It's done to make it very dramatic. But what happens is the analogy of this book is at the start, he's very safe and he's burdened because he has too many choices in life. He doesn't know what to do. It's kind of like the bell jar, and that you have the bell jar and the analogy of the fig tree, and that you have so many different figs and you don't know what to do, and so you kind of take inaction. That's what happens in this book until he finally decides to roll the dice. And the dice concept, it makes them feel alive. And it kind of his philosophy kind of spreads to other people, and they start using this dice mode, the dice as a therapy. And there is kind of a twist in the book where things go wrong. His marriage collapses. He's crushed by kind of the emotional absence to his loved ones and things like that. But there is a kind of moral in this book, in that making decisions that make you feel alive and taking risks. And risk is just taking order and adding a little bit of chaos to it, temporarily. And this is why works like Fight Club resonate so much with men. In Fight Club is about kind of this guy that's in an office and he's craving some chaos, and that's what he gets when he goes into the cage, and that's what Brad Pitt's character represents. Everything he wishes he could be, and Brad Pitt is this kind of reckless guy, and they're men and they're smashing each other and stuff. And the book asks some good questions. If the I think one of the big questions is, well, what if there was something that made the decision for us, like a dice? We're kind of, it's a weird kind of free will thing of, let's have some other spirit make decisions for us. And what is that spirit? It's the spirit of the Eurotic. And that's a quite a hyper example, but what if we were to use the dice and maybe be realistic with what's on each number, and kind of align it to our own different contexts? So it's a way of living. Are in my thoughts there.
Yeah, Jake, I think there is a guiding intuitive force in each of us that has a knowing that's beyond rationality. And maybe at face value it doesn't make sense. But like that article talks about, it strikes something deeper in you than rationality. It makes you excited to wake up in the morning. It makes you feel meaningful. It gave me the kind of goosebumps I had when I was meditating during the national anthem in Brazil. It rumbles something at your core. There's this core hunger for it, that feeling of being alive, that feeling of being connected to your reality in such a significant way that you don't even mind if you die trying to do that thing, or you risk fucking people taking the piss, or you risk being broke your whole life and being a struggling creative, or you risk your parents' opinions of you, or you whatever. It means more than all of that, right? And that is finding that is difficult to do in today's world, because what are we told from like early on in like the narratives of like, let's say, the education system, is to maintain the social order of the class. If you desire to do something, to say something, to act in a certain way, you don't. You shut up, you sit there, you listen. Now I have, to me, the education system served me very well because it sort of fit my style of thinking. But it does hide that voice from us. And there's a line in a song called Father and Son by Cat Stevenson. I don't know if you've heard this song, where he says, "From the moment I could talk, I was ordered to listen," which I really like. As soon as you're becoming an individual, you're socialized. Now that's necessary. You need to be able to get on with other people. You need to be able to become part of a structured, ordered society, and that's that's an agreement we all make, is that we'll sacrifice some of our personal desires to function as a society, and that's important. I agree. But once we get to out of the education system, or we start figuring out what we want to do with our life, we're still ordered to listen. When there's something in us that wants to speak, there's something in us that wants to become and be manifested through some sort of creative action, and we should follow that. We should follow that, even if it doesn't seem right. And I'll finish with this before I pass back on to you. Like, think about it, man. My move to go to London was not a rational one. I was at a better university. Like, I was studying at a Russell Group university. I had a friend group. I was an hour away from home, so I could still drive back on a Tuesday evening to come to family meal. I was just close enough that if anything happens, I could go back home to mummy and everything will be all right. It was a functional good, and it was comfortable, but it didn't rumble me from my core. And I spent many days there just sort of like drifting, I guess is the right word. Whereas each time, as I started to meet new people and get involved in this community in London, that excited me. Every weekend I knew I was going there, it rumbled something to my core. And I remember the moment that I moved and I packed my car up with loads of shit, and I took a camping bed that I then slept on for the first 6 weeks, and I put on fucking New York by Frank Sinatra in the car. It felt something. It felt like I was alive and I was doing something in my life that mattered and that I was connecting to my reality. And I wish more people could feel that, because once you feel that, you know that feeling matters more than anything else, more than what he said or she said, more than how much money you make, more than your social status, because that's what we ultimately want. And that is that, yeah, that's the article's so good. I think if people have got to this point in the episode, you need to read the article.
Yeah, I think the only thing I would add is when you choose to follow that thing that makes you feel alive, that's going to improve you at a much rapid rate. Every kind of philosophy that I've consumed suggests that in kind of moving away into the ocean rather than staying at the shore.
Mm.
And I just want to maybe just clarify when you said that Cat Stevens line about when I could talk, that's when I start to listen. Can you elaborate a little bit on that?
Well, it just kind of aligned with what I was thinking. Is the line is it's a song called "Father and Son" by Cat Stevenson, and I feel like it is a communication of a father telling his son about life. There's a lot of lyrics about like, you've got time, you'll find a girl, you'll figure out what you want to do with your life, you'll settle down, relax, like don't stress, don't take it too seriously. But one of the lines was, "From the moment I could talk, I was ordered to listen." Which I think is the kind of the father voice in that song lamenting on the fact that from the moment he could express himself, he was ordered to conform to what society or what his parents or what he thought his friends and his social group wanted him to do. And I just like that line because it's like, it is kind of like that in this world. Once you become an adult, there are already these pressures on you. You might have your student loans, or like you don't know what to do for your degree, so you do something that seems nice. You go study finance at uni and you become a finance bro, and you wear your quarter zip and you wear your watch and you do your spreadsheets and you pretend that you're happy. But really, you wanted to be a fucking yoga instructor in Bali and just like experience life on a much more deeper level than just what you thought would make you look good or what would earn you money, so you can like pretend that you're happy and buy yourself a nice car. Like, it's a real thing, man. I think this fight between being and doing, or like thinking about, it's James Hollis's distinction again. Rather than what does the world want me to be, it's thinking about what within me desires to be expressed through what I do.
Man, finance bros are honestly the worst. I'm exposed to them because they're on my course, and let me tell you, they're cocky as fuck. They're like, I got this LinkedIn. That's all. They optimize their LinkedIn, which is so superficial. And they sit there in the lectures with the stock market open on the laptop, and it resonates to me because that's the path that I was supposed to choose. That's my path. If I do well and I choose this transactional approach to life. But yeah, these guys, man, like they're not spiritually okay. Let me tell you that. They really, it's undeserved ego because
Yeah.
Look, I've spoke to people that have done 10 years in Canary Wharf. I spoke to one guy. The amount of pain and stress you have to go through, and you also just kind of have a very distorted thing of life, and you're around all this competitive kind of like ego all the time. It's so bad for your spiritual health. But come on, like, you gotta I don't know, it's the there's no kind of adventure or kind of like self-discovery through it. It's, I'm going to work for my boss and deliver these results, and I'm gonna get this nice place. But I don't know, man. It's just these guys are around me a lot.
The way you can think about it, Jake, is their adventure is materialism. So their adventure, their way of being the hero, let's say from Joseph Campbell's perspective, and living the hero's journey and feeling truly alive is, let me work at this place for this many years and work for this promotion and get this paycheck so that I can like drive this car and have my like morning coffee and breakfast at this expensive cafe each morning, and then like wear these clothes and this watch so that people out in public are a little bit jealous of me. You know what I mean? Like that's the mentality. And like, do you remember we met in to when we went to go and do the sensory deprivation tank, and we were in that smoothie place, and it's like 20 quid for a smoothie. No one needs 20 quid for a fucking smoothie. Go buy some berries and some coconut milk and a banana from Sainsbury's for like 3 quid and blend it up yourself. It'll be as nice. But it's a social status thing. It's like a that's where they get their thrill.
Yeah, I mean that's the game they're playing. I wanted to ask about. You gave me a list of your favorite books the other day, and one of them was Viktor Frankl's Man's Search for Meaning, and I don't know really anything about that book. So, is there any kind of takeaways from that? I'm quite interested.
It's about a Jewish psychologist called Viktor Frankl who was taken into a Nazi concentration camp as a prisoner, and survived the Holocaust, and then wrote a body of work about how what maintains mental health is a sense of meaning in life. And that was from his observations of people that somehow managed to mentally stay above complete hell despite his fellow inmates in a concentration camp during the Holocaust. Powerful book. Powerful. I mean, I read it a few years ago, but I know when I did read it, it was immense.
So how did they find meaning through getting a task in the concentration camp?
I remember the one, like, you know how sometimes you read a book and loads of time passes and then all you can remember from it is just one sentiment. But if anything, that one sentiment is priceless and worth the like multiple hours you read the book for. And I remember he said that it made him he flipped thinking of what do I expect from life and what do I owe to life, or what does life owe to me, to like what does life expect from me? That was what kept him through. Is what did he owe to life? What did life demand of me? Because there's this like this obviously this inclination to like think that why has the universe done this to you? Why are you in such a horrible, dire situation full of suffering and pain and loss and abuse? And he just completely turned that on its head and go, well, I still owe it to the universe to show up and to like fight through this, and I owe it to give that back to life. What does life owe? Like, what do I owe to life? And it's just such a beautiful frame from a guy that was in such a horrendous situation.
Yeah, I mean, if World War Three just were to start soon, I think that's the way we got to think about it. We got to not be a victim to it and
Be courageous.
fight for our country and be courageous. And I have a couple thoughts about this actually. A couple quotes. Tragedy plus time equals comedy.
Mm-hmm.
Even after world wars, our grandparents, well, my grandparents have always told the stories about the war, and I remember my barber saying about how his favorite customer was this guy that was a soldier through World War II, and he'd have these absolutely amazing stories. So maybe that quote, even though it says comedy, and maybe that could be replaced to kind of story and stuff, but I think in specific to that quote, like there's a lot of my kind of risks and stuff that I know I'm going to be laughing about in 10 years. And to kind of put another quote on this, the owner of DreamWorks was asked what makes a good story, and he replied, a story is only as good as its villains. So it's like, what are what is the villain? Because if you're a soldier and you've got to take on the enemy country, I mean, that's a massive villain, and that's how a good story is going to come from that. So then I guess you kind of you think you can replace villain with problems, I guess.
Yeah, or
And
like the the quality of the story is related to the ferocity of the dragon that the hero has to slay.
mm,
You know what I mean?
but weirdly, like a lot of problems are just emotional. Like mm, the other day, I was in Costa with my sister, and I knew she wanted to try and get a job there if it was possible, and so I went up and asked. I spoke to the people. I spoke to the baristas, and then afterwards, she was like, "Why did you do that? I didn't ask you to do that." And I said, "Or you didn't tell me you were going to do that." And I said, "Well, if I told you, then you would say no. I don't want you to do that because I'm too scared." And she's not courageous enough to ask herself, and that's just an example of how problems are emotional. It didn't have to be that way.
Yeah.
So so a lot of problems are emotional, or they have.
Or internal may is maybe is a better way of saying it. You know what I mean?
I think yeah, I think we make our problems as big as we think about them because objectively they might be a certain threshold, but the power that we give them is how big they are. The power that we give the dragon is how big we partly is how fierce we think it is. There's this line in this Travis Scott song where he's like, "I'm stressing over award shows. She's stressing over her wardrobe."
I know
And
that song from Coffee Bean. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
yeah, it's a very like real line. um, Not to kind of diss women or anything, but it I think it's weird how we kind of go through life and our tolerance goes up for the amount of shit that we can endure, and I think we have to aim for bigger problems if you want a bigger story, and realize that they could be emotional.
Mm. Yeah, I mean the the size of the dragon you slay, and I use that metaphor for all the problems in life to overcome, those in the material world, those inside you, those emotional ones, those ones in your relationships, those fears that you overcome, the better hero you'll be, you know, and like that's why this quote doesn't leave my mind from James Hollis' book about the negation of the life force by fear violates the meaning of life. That fear, if you invest and you indulge in fear when it tempts you and tries to seduce you, then you violate the meaning in your life. And so the ability to then overcome fear, I guess, and continue to step into the unknown despite fear, despite the size of the dragon, is how you make your life better and more meaningful. And that applies to all of us.
Mm. I think we should maybe stop here, Joel.
I agree.
My brain, after I came out from the toilet, has felt increasingly fried. I thought I could go on for a lot longer, but I think it's going to be the quality of my next points is going to be better in a different day. Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's right. I think this has been one of my favorites, and yeah, appreciate you, man.
Thanks for listening, everyone.